put this up. Awesome. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Great to be here, still virtually, but this is one way we get lots of folks from across the state and other parts of the country. So that's exciting. My name is Elizabeth Beggins. I am the Maryland Agriculture Outreach Specialist for the Million Acre Challenge. This is a collaborative project with 6 founding organizational partners and an aspirational goal of 1 million acres of Maryland agriculture land in regenerative practices by 2030. Next slide, please. We are going to go ahead and kick off a poll for folks that come in later. Either you'll have a chance to do this later or not, but it's just a way for us to gauge who's here. It kind of helps to see who's in the room. Might help us tailor some of our comments. So I think that launched yet, Amanda? I don't know if it has or not. I haven't seen it yet.
I think so. If folks don't see it, let me know.
I'm not seeing it.
Yeah, nor am I. Are other folks seeing the poll?
I see it.
Okay.
I was able to see it.
Okay, good. Somehow it's it's excluding us organizers, which is fine. Hi, Steve. Thanks for being here. Thanks for doing the poll too. If for any reason you can't access the poll, what we're asking is whether you're here as a farmer or a farm service provider, a researcher, an ag retailer, an aspiring farmer, or other and an other category, and then kind of what you're interested in learning more about. So if those aren't available to you through the official poll, feel free to put them in chat, and also just use chat generally to introduce yourself, tell us why you're here, and any questions that you have as we go along. Also helping out today are Amanda Cather, our project director, and Lisa Garfield, who heads up the Million Acre Challenge for Future Harvest. Next slide, please, Lisa. Some of the work of the Million Acre Challenge is captured here, certainly not all of it, because we're a lot busier than these 4 squares would lead you to believe. But in the context of these activities, we are getting a lot of soil health work done across the state. So Lisa heads up our soil testing and benchmarking study through Future Harvest, and the Pennsylvania Association for Sustainable Ag, who is the parent of the study. We also do farmer to farmer networking. If I can ask folks to mute if they need to talk, that would be helpful. A lot of farmer to farmer networking. One of the things that we do regularly are these lunch and learns, in addition to on-farm demonstrations and other opportunities. Please just stay connected with us and join in as you see fit. Our consumer engagement and farm profitability components are ongoing. Pinning down practices as relate to cost analysis is no small task, and we are still working on that. Next slide, please. So just a couple of quick announcements. We do encourage you to enroll in the challenge. It's a way of counting your acres in this project, and there are really no strings attached. It's just a very quick self-assessment that you'll find on our website, millionacrechallenge.org. And it gives us a chance to make sure that you get our newsletter. We don't spam you, I promise. We're too busy for that. And to sort of see who's doing what across the state of Maryland. Amanda, I'm seeing your chat there, and yes, I skipped right over ending the poll. So we'll look at those results in just one moment. Here's our social media opportunities. If you're there, we'd love for you to follow us on any of those channels. We have a couple of winter conferences coming up that we're very involved with. Future Harvest is tomorrow and Friday. So we're busy with that, particularly Lisa. And right after that, February 7th and 8th, the Delmarva Soil Summit. So Future Harvest, again, tomorrow and Friday. Delmarva Soil Summit, not until February 7th and 8th. Check those out. Okay, poll results. Who we got here?
It looks like we had 70% participate, and 3 of those are farmers. 1 wants to become a farmer. 2 are farm service providers. We have the most interest in reducing fertilizer or herbicide use, probably no surprise, given the cost of those inputs right now. I would like to reduce them too. Funding opportunities for soil health practices is also of interest, and farm diversification. So we have a lot of diversity among the topics that folks are interested in. We're very glad to have all of you here today.
Yeah, that's great. And I think Kevin Waring and his father, Francis, are going to be able to speak to a number of those, at least from their perspective. Next slide, and I'll go ahead and introduce Kevin, the heart of today's event. He's here with his father, Francis, in the background there, who he farms with alongside his wife, Lauren, and their kids. It's Persistence Creek Farm in Faulkner, Maryland. It's a 245-acre grain, seafood, and timber business, which is half tillable and half forested. To foster soil fertility, they use crop rotation, low and no-till practices, cover crops, and really paying attention to nutrient management so that they're doing their best to boost soil microorganisms, minimize chemical inputs, maximize yields, and really help to protect the Chesapeake Bay. Kevin is a self-described flower geek. I love that. And the family has worked to build pollinator and wildlife habitat. They've also leveraged state and federal conservation funds. Kevin is an active member of the Maryland Farm Bureau, the Charles County Watermen's Association, the Charles Soil Conservation District, all while maintaining a full-time off-farm job with the Navy. So we pretty much assume he doesn't sleep. Next slide. These are some of the questions that we'll be going over today, but this slide will disappear. So I'll have access to this from the background, but when we move on to the next slide, I'm going to hand the talking stick over to you, Kevin, and we'll start right off with you telling us about your farm and your holistic approach to the land there. Next slide, Lisa.
Sure. So thank you so much again. Yeah, my name is Kevin Waring from Persistence Creek Farm. This is my father, Francis, here to my right. We are excited to be here today for a lot of reasons, but one, it's fun to be surrounded by folks who are interested in soil health, but in addition to soil health, but how does that soil health translate into other benefits, not only protecting the bay and benefiting wildlife? So here at Persistence Creek Farm, we really try to get 3 big elements to work together, right? So the soil health being the first and foremost, and then, you know, the things we do to protect the soil also have benefits in protecting the bay and also, again, benefiting wildlife. So, you know, whether it be nutrient management, where we are, you know, minimizing our inputs or trying to ensure long-term sustainability and productivity of our soils, it also limits the amount of fertilizer that we might have to put down. And, you know, because of that, if there's any sort of runoff concerns, right, you're just worried less about nutrients running off. Cover crops, again, a very soil-focused practice to armor the soil, to reduce its runoff potential, but it has side benefits too, right? Again, we have wintering to come, and
You should come and see this.
from that, and, you know, also that benefit to the microorganisms over time.
Hello.
I think
I'm just going to hop in real quick and ask folks to mute if they need to be talking in the background, just so that we don't interrupt Kevin and his dad.
Sorry.
That's okay, Lisa.
Yeah, no worries, for sure. And by all means, if someone does have a question, please interrupt me if you have one. So again, nutrient management, cover crops being 2 kind of staples here in our operation. And I feel like when we think about our farm and what we want it to be like throughout the years, we have this saying that we kind of want to have the farm be alive all year, right? And that's from the lens of the soil being alive, whether that being, you know, the cover crop itself or our primary grain crops, but then also just within our our timber as well. We want that to be productive, and then along the edge as well. So I guess the big picture for us is that we don't necessarily focus on any one thing. We kind of look at it all together as one big cycle.
Recording in progress.
I think maybe another thing too that is interesting when we talk about soil is there's what we're doing to increase soil productivity in the field, but then again, along the edge as well. So we have practices that we've installed here at the farm that are, riparian buffer areas, or you heard mention of my, being a flower geek, right? Native grasses, native flowers. What's exciting is that if there is any sort of runoff from our soil, these practices that we have along the edge help reduce that runoff. So again, we're trying to think about what we can do in the field to improve our business and our productivity of our soils and to maximize yields, but also in complement have practices that help protect the edge and are that sort of barrier of last result if runoff were to occur. One thing we haven't talked about yet is, why are we emphasizing kind of this concern about runoff or water quality is, we also have a seafood business. We harvest crabs during the summer, and we plant oysters and harvest oysters in the winter. So to us, again, back to this holistic approach of what we do on the farm is beneficial for the farm, but it also is beneficial for the bay and our other businesses, and really just the way of life for many Marylanders. Any questions so far before I continue on?
I have a question for you, Kevin, that you can address as you carry along, and kind of just, have you found it difficult to farm this way? You and I talked before this event, and you said you've been farming this way pretty much for forever. But I think folks might like to hear whether you find that to be challenging.
Yeah, I think just to talk about our conversation in particular, I was surprised to hear that there are farmers still that aren't using no-till practices. So I know Dad and I come from origins of being tobacco farmers here in Southern Maryland, and back then we just certainly tilled the land, but for many years, we bought our farm here in 2009, but the farm I grew up on, has been in the family longer than that. For many years, we've been using no-till practices, and it's not just us. I feel like our whole region has really embraced no-till farmers, certainly minimum tillage or conservation tillage practices. One of the things that is certainly helpful in trying to implement this practice is the fact that there's cost share programs to help you, right? So Maryland kind of leads the way in our cover crop programs. And so for us, when we plant a cover crop, even though we don't plan to harvest that winter wheat, let's say, we are still getting, cost share or getting paid to implement that practice. So for us, it's actually a profit generator to implement cover crops throughout the year. Is it hard? I think there are pros and cons to every approach. I think if you spoke to someone who did still use, the plow or some sort of other tilling practice, there may be reasons that they have to do that. And I think that's hopefully a conversation that all of us are willing to have with each other to kind of understand the pros and cons of different approaches. And so I would say from our perspective, it isn't necessarily difficult. We think it's profitable. We think it's good for the soil, but we certainly will be willing to have a conversation with someone who has a different opinion.
I think that's really important. Context makes such a difference. And so I think you're right on to acknowledge that every farm is going to have different kinds of decisions and different situations to consider. So thank you for that. I think our upcoming slides deal with some of the work that you all have done to improve resiliency, in particular with your with your stream and some of the infrastructure you've put in there. Lisa, you can hop to the next slide and I'll let Kevin and Francis address that.
Yeah, so we have a blue line stream that runs through our property called Ross Branch. And as many of you probably have also experienced, the weather that we have been experienced here in Maryland and across the US and across the globe is changing. And so I think, what was it, 2016 or 17, I think there was a quote unquote 500-year storm. And we're seeing some of these storms more and more often. And what this picture you're seeing here is showing is, the stream came out of its banks and deposited not only the large rocks that you see, but tons and tons of sand on the soybean field that you see behind it. And if you look hard enough, there's a red barn in the background. You can see soybeans that are standing, and then you can see soybeans that are closer that are laid over. And so what happened is the whole stream come out of its banks and really destroyed a lot of crops. So I guess I don't want to focus too much on this particular event, but just the idea of when you have major storms, it just reinforces the need to have your soil protected. Or in here, we have done, I think there's another picture here where we've taken and worked with NRCS and our soil conservation districts to design some barriers and kind of fortify our stream to try to prevent this from happening. But it really just speaks writ large to the fact that, our soil isn't, it's not a given, right? The fact that we have to be stewards of the soil, whether it be through a cover crop or to try to implement innovative practices like this, where we're just trying to protect the soil from being covered up by 6 inches of sand, right? We have to take an active role in protecting the soil.
And I think the same concept is at play here. You designed and worked with funding sources to create a stream crossing. Is that what this is? That right? Is that what this is?
Yeah. So as you can see in this top left, the original stream crossing when we bought the farm was just a dirt track that someone had driven over. So you can imagine lots of erosion consistently. So we established a more fortified crossing to try to limit that sort of erosion.
I have enjoyed looking at the photos of these young, happy faces. And I imagine it's a source of joy and pride for you all to know that you are nurturing the next generation. I'll let you talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, and I think before we get too far into the next generation, I just want to also pause and go back and emphasize one point about when we first had like our first phone call where we got to know each other a little bit. I told you, I said, hey, I didn't think I was a soil expert, or I just don't think that any one of us are experts at everything. And so, when I mentioned that we work with NRCS or Soil Conservation District or our extension office to learn about different techniques that we can employ, take that to heart, particularly for the farmers on here who, might be a beginning farmer or feel like you're not necessarily familiar with some of these opportunities. Try to get to know these offices and the people there by first name and walk in, and they're going to be happy to talk to you. So I just wanted to go back and emphasize that to make sure I didn't forget it. So with that in mind, I'll kind of pivot to, we've been doing the work here at our farm for, going on 12 years now. And all of eaches, whether it be the stream work that you saw or our riparian buffers, we haven't even talked about some of the other wildlife things, like we have shallow water impoundment areas. The more recently it's been timber work where we're creating kind of diversity in our timber or some of the native grass and flower plantings. All of that takes time. And I think my mom, if she was here, she'd say, you got to enjoy the journey, right? It takes time and effort and for all these pieces to come together. And I guess the reason I bring that up to tie it into the next generation is that, the reason we're doing all this, the reason we're kind of constantly looking forward to the next thing that we're going to do is that we're trying to leave, this land, if you will, as well as, the Chesapeake Bay better off than we found it, right? And the reason we're trying to do that, of course, is for the next generation. You can see in this picture, my 2 daughters and then my nephew, they all live here on the farm, and it's just exciting to see them appreciate what's going on here, right? Whether they're paying attention to the fact that we even have a cover crop, or the fact that, we play in a stream and it's fun to play in the stream, but we kind of appreciate how this ag production field leads to a riparian buffer area that leads to the stream. So a lot of little pieces that you can stitch together, both in the work that you're accomplishing, but also in the imprint that you're leaving behind to your friends and family.
So I'm seeing here, sorry, I'm having a little trouble getting my cursor to behave. Susan worked with Kevin on NRCS programs since they got the farm. Gratified to see how Kevin and Francis's conservation efforts have progressed and the vision their whole farm with the family has developed. Excited to get Kevin talking about flowers. Yeah. And yeah, weathering big weather events in 2011 and 2016, and how the farm has been better situated to handle those. Thank you for that comment, Susan. Lisa, if you'll go to the next slide, I love this because it's such a great sort of all in the family photo, and the dog too.
Yeah.
I love that everybody is, kind of taking, well, we've already said it, but this holistic approach, like the land provides for us, and then we do our best to take care of the land. And it's a cycle, right? All right, let's get Kevin talking about flowers by switching to this next slide. Tell us a little bit about the pollinator habitat.
Sure, and let's see. So we have some of this we did on our own, just kind of went rogue, if you will, and said we're going to go do it. And then more recently, we've joined partners with NRCS and entered into a conservation stewardship plan, the CSP contract. So, what we wanted to do is really, again, increase that edge habitat along our farm, right? A lot of our farm landscape went from mature timber right into ag production. And so we wanted to create that early successional habitat, and also, again, be that barrier, that fortress against any potential runoff that might be going into the Chesapeake Bay. So what you see here are pictures of some of our beautiful flowers. And this is year 3 since their establishment. And then real quick, I'll talk a little bit about the establishment itself. We waited till kind of late spring after, competing annuals would be there. We did an herbicide treatment to try to limit any competition, did no-till planting to do the initial plant. And then during the first year, we did mowing a few times to kind of limit competition from other weeds like crabgrass or things like that you wouldn't want to see here. Since then, it's become a little bit more on autopilot, right? I mean, it's amazing once you establish a perennial planting like this, right? There is maintenance to be done, but it's very much low maintenance at this point. We've seen wildlife react to it immensely, whether that be turkeys that are eating it around, or bugs or seeds from this, or whether it be the little finches that come in. We can have like 50 to 100 birds in groups, feeding on the flowers in this area all the time. So it's been a really rewarding project to kind of see something start from a blank slate and then transition to this very productive set of acres on the farm now. I see Amanda has a question. Are these strips within fields, on the borders, or both? And the answer is both. I think you might even have a picture, Elizabeth, if you could flip that, where we have like
Yeah, Lisa, it is slide number, let me see if I can find it real quick. 15. We get to review. Well, there it is on the right there. Is that the one you were thinking about?
No, but that's okay. Well, like that's an example, this one here on the right. So this is one of the strips that we use to divide two ag fields. And it's sort of in the middle of an ag field, but then we also have areas that are along the transition of timber as well.
And maybe that's the one just before 14. Let's look at that one.
Yeah, so this is more, this was a larger planting as opposed to a strip that was kind of in an area that didn't have very productive soils, often would get wet and would be difficult to farm. And so we kind of wanted to maximize its benefit here by providing this wildlife habitat.
So we have about 3 official minutes left. I know that some folks are going to need to hop off right at 12:30, and Kevin and Francis are going to stay, I guess, a little bit longer, but we don't want to keep anybody too far past what we promised. We had just about gotten to slide number 22, which is a great picture of some beautiful corn with Francis sort of standing there as a height gauge. I love that. And then, on the right here, just kind of how the vision is working at the farm with cover crops and wildlife. And I also just want to point out all the flowers that we've been talking about and the wildlife are a form of diversity that is really important. So I'll let you speak to this slide.
Sure. So you can see my dad here on the left. Again, if we're protecting our soil, it's in that farmer's best interest to do that because that impacts our yields that we have here at the farm. It also, I think we touched on it earlier, but it minimizes input costs as well. So just purely from a business perspective, protecting our soils is a good thing. On the right is just kind of a view from where my sister and our houses are sitting. And one of our favorite things to do this time of year is watch geese come and feed in our fields. And it again emphasizes, as Elizabeth was saying, this cycle from protecting the soil, protecting the bay, protecting the wildlife.
And what about community? You are a big part of opportunities in your community. How do you think that influences some of what you're doing?
Well, so if we think about this conversation we've been having, and sorry, because I am an economist, I'll call it this. I feel like all this is sort of like a public good, right? It's something that we all should care about. Our whole community should care about. And so, the bottom right picture here is us doing a farm tour with local legislators to teach them about what's going on here. And because these goals are sort of public goals, it reinforces this need for cost share programs, right? Because as a farmer, although a cover crop, I told you how that was productive for me financially and helps me with yields, a riparian buffer might be a direct hit against my bottom line, right? If you see in that picture there, we're holding a flag, the kind of riparian buffer is right behind us. And it's, it's a 40, 50 foot section of field that no longer exists, right? And if you multiply that by the thousands of feet the field runs, we're talking about acres of production that are coming out. So it just reinforces this idea of partnership, right? So farmers working with our community, with
Kevin, it seems you've just gone on mute. I'm not sure how or why.
Okay. I think I was saying, again, the partnership of if farmers can work with their community, can work with their legislators, we can align common goals and work together to achieve them. So that's sort of what the farm tour is all about. And then, you can see Farm Bureau or my time in the Young Farmers Group and other groups. It's just amazing what you can learn from others. There's so many people in our community that want to help and align towards these goals.
So one thing we really haven't talked about much today, and that is the fact that you recently received this really prestigious Leopold Conservation Award, which was the first one awarded in Maryland. And I would just encourage folks, while I'm wrapping up here, I'll try to find the the address, the website. There's a great write-up from the Sand County folks who are the authors of that award. And you all might want to go and look at that just to learn more about Persistence Creek. Unfortunately, we don't have time today to talk about everything we want to talk about. Kevin, Francis, how would you like to wrap this up? I know we might stick around for a few questions if folks have them, but kind of what are your parting comments? What would you like to impart to those who were here listening in today?
I want to start with your question of, is this hard? I think in some ways it is, in some ways it isn't. I would encourage you to work with as many people around you as you can. Learn from others. As I said, we're not experts here. We're all still learning. And I think if we kind of take that mindset, then we can do great things together. Patience is a virtue. You know, if you have a set of projects or at your farm that you want to tackle, realize that it's going to take time, because we can only do so much. But if you kind of write down your list of goals and start checking them off, you know, that's a good way to kind of step through them. And then I guess with that in mind, you know, always be looking forward, right? You know, be mindful of your goals today, but be thinking about how you're going to get to the long-term vision that you want to achieve.
Yeah, that it's become a little bit cliche, but I still really like the it's a marathon, not a sprint. I like that expression, and it definitely applies, I think, to folks doing the kind of work that you're doing at Persistence Creek. Our last slide is coming up, and I'll just go ahead and bring that up so that folks can have my email if you have further questions or comments you'd like to make, things you'd like to see us consider presenting on, farmers you think we should invite, whatever it is, don't hesitate to reach out. We really are a farmer-focused operation, and we want to hear from you. I will also go ahead and thank those who have been here, and Kevin and Francis for being here. But if there are more questions, I think Kevin is very willing to stick around for a couple of minutes to answer those if folks have anything they want to bring up.
I'll jump in with a question. So I think you talked about this a bit with the pollinator habitat and the flower production, but can you talk about any other ways that you see the other enterprises on your farm kind of combining to form a system? So ways that, you know, you see interaction between the seafood part of your business and the cropping part, you know, or the timber. What are the relationships between those things that you think make it like combine to a holistic system?
Sure. I think we talked a lot about cover crops today with emphasis soil, and clearly that helps reduce runoff, and reduced runoff makes you know, our water healthier, and healthier waters result in, you know, more crab population, more oyster business, you know, all that kind of fits together. I think another one that we've been working on, particularly over the last few years, is one thing that farmers deal a lot with is crop damage. So, you know, white-tailed deer being one a good example of crop damage that we have to deal with here. And what we do with our riparian buffer areas, along with our timber work that we've done, where we're creating these patch openings, you know, two-ish to 1.5-ish acre openings within our timber, or even some of just the timber stand improvement where you're going and thinning your forest. Those things in combination provide a robust alternative food source for white-tailed deer, right? So when you think about, you might say, well, if I take certain amount of production land out of business and put these other native species there, you know, is that going to help my bottom line? And I think we believe that these sacrificial crops, these other native crops, the timber improvements that we're doing are actually going to increase production, because, you know, these things, the deer and other wildlife species are going to have alternative food sources. They're not going to have to sit on our soybean field day after day to eat. Now, they still may go there and they still may eat some, but it's not going to be in the way that they would if there was sort of a food desert otherwise.
That's great. Thank you for that question and your response. Other questions from the folks that are still with us? I see some familiar names out there. I went to a meeting last night and somebody called me out by name. I'll try not to do that. They said, Elizabeth, would you like to go first? I went, no.
Looks like there's a question in the chat. Lisa Orange is thanking you for your presentation. She has 110 acres, 70 in forest and 40 in fields. One field is in wildflowers that were already there. The other two haven't been in crops for about 5 years. So looking for suggestions about where to start. Yeah, that's a lot to start with.
Yeah, no, so it is the plan, Lisa, for you to still farm in the 40 acres of fields?
Yeah, we want to do that. The previous owner planted one field in wildflower,
Okay,
and it's awesome. But the forest lands need to be thinned and taken care of. We've been fighting thistle in the other field, and got a call from the state about it because it was out of control. So we've been mowing and monitoring and watching. But I was wondering if timing wise, if it's better to get those fields planted or work on stabilizing the streams that are eroding or work on thinning the forest, or if there's one place you would suggest that we start.
yeah, so
You can build your fertility up, putting crop in like soybeans.
yeah. So I would definitely say that, so look at it, you have to, when you do land management, you kind of have to think at it as a 365-year management, right? So think about it for each month. You can kind of break down what your work is by month or a couple months. So in the winter, I plan to attack, like projects we're still doing here. We have some invasive species that are in our hedgerows, right? You know, we tackle that now during quote unquote the off season. And then, you know, we have when the land is more able to kind of take to, as we pivot to spring and summer, right? We have more opportunity to do direct management of our croplands, you know, and then the fall maybe is a good time to start doing the timber work. So I would suggest kind of thinking about your projects and aligning them across the year when you think you can work on them, just given the conditions of your land. So that's one suggestion. And then the other one, honestly, is I go back to all the resources that are out there, whether that be NRCS, Soil Conservation Extension Office, your local forester. So like we have a forest stewardship plan on our farm that kind of helped us decide what we're going to do with our timber. We have, you know, a lot of the ideas for what we did as far as project wise, we got a lot of that inspiration from our soil conservation or NRCS offices. So, you know, go meet with them and kind of sit down and develop that plan, right? Those conservation plans you can develop with them directly. Did that help?
It seems like Lisa might have come off the call. I don't know if that was intentional. I don't see her name anymore. So fortunately, your answer will be available on the recording. And I'm glad you brought up the resources that are out there. I was thinking about conservation planners and how I know they've been useful for some of the other farmers that we've worked with. And that might be a good somebody to just help corral all those options into a plan. Yeah. All right. It's 12:40. I think we probably should use this pause as a jumping off point unless somebody has a question they just can't hold on to. All right.
Hey, Elizabeth, if you don't mind, I just wanted to put my email address in the chat. It might have been already in the presentation, but you know, anyone on the call, please, you know, send me an email if you have any questions. If you just want to brainstorm about what you're doing on your farm and how, you know, what we may have done here at our place and will it work for you, and all of that. We're standing by to kind of be helpful, because honestly, I think I speak for my dad and myself and our whole family that, we certainly could not have gotten where we were at without the help of others. And so we kind of want to pay that forward.
Thank you for that. For purposes of folks that might be listening to the recording later, the email address is Kevin Waring, just like it's spelled in previous slides, @gmail.com. I'm not sure that chat will be accessible, but hopefully that'll help folks find you. And thank you for that offer, because I think networking has been a big part of most of the farmers that we've worked with who are at a place where they're really moving balls forward in this arena. I think have all said the same thing. First, that it takes time and that they're not doing it alone. So I think those are really critical components. Thank you so much. Congratulations again on the Leopold Award, and keep up the great work. And we look forward to being in touch with all of you in the future. Happy New Year.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.